Mr. Pejđ, you are the coordinator of the Western Balkan Summit that is going to be hosted by the United Kingdom this July in London. This is part of the Berlin process, which was launched by the Chancellor Merkel in 2014 and then followed by the summits that took place in Paris, Vienna and in Trieste last year. What are going to be the priorities of this 2018 summit?
Yes, thank you. It's very important to mention those 4 previous summits. Ours is the 5th in a series, and our starting point is we want to build on the achievements of the previous summits. There are 3 thematic areas on which we'll be focusing in London. The first particularly is the economic stability, which is all about interconnectivity, improving road, rail, and telecoms and fibre optic infrastructure to make it easier for people to travel between the countries and to project this region as a common region for investment and reducing trade barriers, which is going to be good for business. And a lot of that is led by the European Commission, but there are ways that London can help, playing to British strengths by helping to improve access to finance, and that's not just finance for infrastructure, but particularly finance for small and medium-sized enterprises, which are very important for your economies, and indeed access to venture capital for your young entrepreneurs with great ideas for their own startups, but they're going to need that financial support to make it work. And London is a big financial centre and will continue to be so. So that's the first set of area, economic and economic stability. Second area is more to do with security in terms of internal security, by which I mean tackling common problems that affect us all on serious and organised crime, on corruption, on trafficking of people, trafficking of drugs, trafficking of firearms coming through the Balkans route and into other parts of Europe, sometimes linked to immigration problems as well, of crime. And then the final area of issues which we're going to be looking at is more linked to the bilateral disputes, which are long-standing and intractable, and also the legacy issues stemming from the events of the 1990s.
UK is going through Brexit phase.
Yes.
Does the initiative to host this summit in July mean that it still remains focused and dedicated to this region?
More so than ever, I would say. And the reason I say that, often I'm asked the question, why are we hosting a summit which is about enlarging the EU to the countries of the Western Balkans when Britain is leaving the EU? It's the obvious question to ask. But I think that we have an answer to that, which is that Britain has been a very strong advocate of enlargement of the European Union for years now, for decades, and for good reason. We've seen countries that have come into the EU in the wave 2004 and since then, where it's made a major impact to their economies, the standard of their infrastructure, their standard of living. It's the discipline of opening and closing all those chapters and satisfying the EU acquis, which causes internal reforms to be brought about, which otherwise might not happen. And we believe that can still be beneficial for these countries in this part of the world in terms of entrenching their economic stability and improving standard of living. And we want to see those countries that want to reach that EU destination. It's a sovereign decision for their governments to take and the people who elect their governments. But if they're set along that path, Britain is committing to continuing to help them so that we are an enduring partner in the long term to our Western Balkans friends. One of my ministers who was visiting the region recently, meeting all of the 6 Western Balkans foreign ministers, put it in the 4 words, same friends, different structures. And I think what you'll see in London is there's a very strong commitment to helping these countries on the path towards EU accession through helping to meet all of these 6 flagship initiatives that have been launched in the enlargement strategy. And we have a vested interest in this. It's not just altruism. And it's because some of the areas we want to tackle together on serious and organised crime, they affect us too in London. Some of the things that are coming through the Balkans route. And our Prime Minister, Theresa May, who's been Home Secretary for 6 years, has been focused on these issues for a long time. And we're doing a lot behind the scenes to help law enforcement agencies to tackle the problems from within. And we will be recommitting ourselves to that in London. And the final element about this, which I think is very important, is that the money we currently spend through the European Union, which is not far off 150 million euros every year, it goes into the energy and the transport infrastructure projects through the Western Balkans investment framework. But after we've left the EU, we want to ring-fence that money so that we continue to spend every bit as much money helping these countries on their path towards EU accession, but we'll have more say over where that money is spent, whether it's spent on rule of law, good governance, independence of the judiciary, helping media freedom and pluralism of the media, areas where government ministers are telling us that they want our support.
You're in Skopje as part of a broader visit to the region, visiting all the 6 capitals of the Western Balkans. What is your assessment of their achievements when it comes to reforms and how they implement the directions by the EU enlargement strategy given this January?
Well, I think it's an extremely important 6-month period, this start of 2018. So there's new impetus, there's new dynamic, and I think there's a lot of encouragement for these countries to make progress on the EU path. Of course, they will all need to introduce reforms, and different countries are moving at different paces there. But I think Macedonia in particular, I'm very impressed by the visit I've had in the last 24 hours, has made a lot of progress through the 369 programme, which I was discussing with the Deputy Prime Minister this morning. And I think you'll find that in the June European Council, which will take place just at the end of Bulgaria's presidency, there will be a lot of support for the idea that Macedonia opens its accession negotiations.
The London summit comes just 2 days before the NATO summit.
Yes.
in July. On this summit, Macedonia is hoping to get an invitation to join the alliance. Of course, the condition is to previously settle the name dispute with Greece. How realistic do you think it is that this issue will be settled in this time frame?
It's a delicate issue, it's a sensitive issue, it's a very topical one at the moment because negotiations are going on currently, and indeed I think the Greek Foreign Minister is due here in Skopje today. I had a very useful meeting with your Foreign Minister about that this morning here at the residence. Of course, we're all optimistic. We would love to see a deal done, and the rest of us countries are doing what we can to support and to encourage the process. Ultimately, as in most negotiations, there needs to be some give and take on both sides. But what's very clear to us is that this would give a whole new dynamic, not just to Macedonia, but to the whole region, were a deal to be done. Of course, we would love to be able to celebrate such a deal in London, at the London summit. These things are complex, and it's a long-lasting dispute. And ultimately it needs to be a decision which is a decision for politicians to take on both sides, which requires some political courage. I'm well aware of the sensitivity and the complexity, but Britain's doing everything it can, as is France and Germany and the Americans, everybody else, to encourage a good outcome and to encourage a breakthrough. And so we're very much hoping, and I've spoken about this to our ambassador, that there's as good a window now for a deal to be done in this first 6 months of the year as there has been for quite a number of years now. So we're all rooting for the negotiators to reach success.
Thank you, Mr. Pejđ, for the interview for Sittel TV.
Thank you very much.